Hey folks, all right, let's keep the content coming. I'm getting into wattle mode. Now I'm on Parramatta Creek in Western Sydney on a Sunday. It's a boiling hot day. I don't want to be out here for too long, I'm going to get fried. But I know you'd have to know this, but in this sort of part of Western Sydney or Western Sydney generally, you're basically going to get two bipinnates. You're going to get parramattensis and decurrens. You could find Filicifolia or parvipinula or Mearnsii, but it's more than likely if you did, they'll be planted. If you're on the Cumberland Plain in Western Sydney, and this would be a little bit of river flat forest or even casuarina, swamp oak forest on a creek line, your main two suspects are decurrens and parramattensis. It's just the way it goes. Now, this one, it's November. It's late November now, and the heat's starting to turn on a bit, and this one's flowering. It's in full flower, you can see that. Beautiful globular heads on these bipinnate wattles, and you can see the buds there as well, just forming. So we've got buds, and we've got beautiful globular heads as well. They're a nice sort of pale yellow colour, and because it's a summer flowerer and the location I'm in, a bit of the first lazy default is sort of parramattensis, Acacia parramattensis. For flowering now, Western Sydney, in my experience, Acacia decurrens, it's a much earlier flowerer. It flowers in about July, August. And the heads are a bit more golden yellow. They're more of a golden yellow, deeper golden yellow colour. Now they're sort of what I call some lazy botanical defaults, but the fact that it's flowering now in November and they're pale, and it's much later than July, August. That's good for parramattensis. We're just going to check out some really concrete features. They get a nice dark chunk. It sort of goes very dark in parramattensis a lot of the time. Sometimes it's called the Parramatta green wattle. Sometimes it's called the black wattle as well. And it's getting that real dark chunk. If you look at the Filicifolia video, the chunk was a lot paler, grey. It was also very smooth, and this has got chunky bark all over it. It's got a much more chunky bark. There was no bark on the Filicifolia that I could pull off. It's got a lot of gum coming out too. A lot of gum there. So these wattles, they sort of live fast, die young. They're parramattensis, they're a bit of a fast grower. And this guy, he's already on the verge probably of falling over. Might be getting one last flowering in. There's a bit of dieback on it. And if he came back next season or next year maybe, he might have fallen over. But I've got the foliage here in my hands. Maybe don't know if I'll get into the shade. Yeah, it might be a bit better. And just let me do my focusing in. And you can see with parramattensis, most of the time, or I'd say a lot of the time, you've got no interjugary glands. You've just got jugary glands, or what might be sort of just slightly subjugary here. We might use that term subjugary. But you can see it doesn't have the interjugary glands of Filicifolia. But I think the foliage is sort of very similar. So we're just getting that one jugary gland, and what I associate with parramattensis is one interjugary gland, and you can see it there. It's just there, about 2/3 of the way down. I just got a low battery notification. Hopefully we're still rolling. Yeah, it's about 2/3 of the way down. Can you see that there? That second gland, but only interjugary gland. It's like one interjugary gland, and that's what you can get with parramattensis. It took me a while to find it in this population. I looked at leaf after leaf after leaf, trying to get that interjugary gland, that one gland that's about 2/3 of the way down what we might call the internode, or the interjugary section there between two pairs of pinnae, to get all the terms right. So that's what I associate with parramattensis. With decurrens, you don't tend to get interjugary glands ever. You just get jugary glands. The ones that are located where the pinnae are, But look for that second, or that second gland, that 1 interjugary gland about 2/3 of the way down. That's typical parramattensis. That's what I strongly associate with it. On top of that, being a summer flowerer, they're really common in Western Sydney. Most of the time they're not quite as big as Decurrens. Decurrens is a bit more of a larger tree with a thicker trunk, but it's a nice tree, parramattensis. It happily grows in copses, but unfortunately, yeah, they sort of tend to die off quickly and fall over. But do look out for that 1 interjugary gland. So that's what I always associate with it. It can be a little bit variable, and they do say parramattensis might possibly integrate with some other wattles as well. It might be able to integrate with Decurrens and some other ones. If I get this, just getting a second leaf, you'll see it has mainly jugary glands and doesn't have any interjugary. It just took me a long while to find that one with the 1 interjugary gland. Just get a bit more representation. I'm just picking random leaves here. Might have to get into the sun a little bit, see what that does. Can't even see what's going on there at all. But yeah, jugary glands there, just at the base of the pinnae. So that's pretty typical parramattensis, mainly jugary, but look for that 1 interjugary gland. Very different to folicifolia. So that's a beautiful Parramatta wattle, or Parramatta green wattle. I think I've heard it called black wattle, like a lot of other wattles, just because of its dark trunk. It should be one you can get familiar with. You can get parts of the world where Decurrens and parramattensis will grow together commonly. This is one part. Another part I know is sort of around Goulburn, Bungonia, Marulan, down the Hume Highway there. You get a lot of parramattensis and Decurrens growing together. But you can discern them if you take your time. Do remember the different flowering periods. Beautiful wattle. Alrighty. Okay, just the final tidbits on Acacia parramattensis. A tree to 15 metres high, but often I see them as a lot smaller than that. And often how I see them is growing in a dense copse. So what it will do is, if you've got some disturbed bushland or previously cleared bushland, which you have a lot of in Western Sydney, it'll tend to establish as a copse, not all the time, but a lot of the time. You can see it growing in sort of dense copses to 5 metres tall. It might consist of tens or hundreds of stems, with each stem being sort of dark and or maybe pale brown to about, you know, 1 inch across or 2 inches across. They tend to do that a lot, parramattensis. Decurrens can do that as well, growing in copses, but parramattensis does it a lot. But yeah, I guess in places I've seen trees to 15 metres high, I just usually see them a lot smaller. The ones I filmed for this video were probably 6 metres or something like that. Don't forget that dark brown to black trunk, and I've got another photo of that. Parramattensis can be on a variety of soils. I've definitely seen it on clay and alluvial or alluvium and sandy as well. Now, when it's on sandy soils, it might be a result of naturalising, but I've definitely seen it on sandy soils too. But more often it's on these two, but it doesn't tend to be overly fussy about soil. Natural distribution, it's a New South Wales species purely, it's endemic. It goes as far north as, I've said Yango National Park, but it's more a bit further north to around the Broke, Muswellbrook area. It's like a line between Broke and Muswellbrook. That'd be slightly further north of Yango, I think, although Yango goes up that way. And then it extends south through the Central Coast, Southern Tablelands, as well as the southwestern slopes and south coast. And there's a mention online that it might be naturalised in the southwestern slopes. So it's another wattle that will spread beyond its natural range, or it has spread beyond that, probably through planting, direct seeding, and it definitely goes up and down the freeways and the Hume Highway, for example, down towards Goulburn and Canberra. You can see it on the sides of the road. Yass and that area. So it has sort of naturalised outside its natural range, they think. Some records, just to give the extremes, there's some records out near Dubbo, Griffith and Holbrook, as far south as Cooma and Bega. And like I said, as far north as that Broke Musselbrook area. So some of that might be from naturalisations. It flowers in late spring and summer, don't forget that. And the flower, that's pretty reliable. And the flowers are typically a pale yellow. They're not a deep golden yellow like what you see in Decurrens. They're more a sort of pale yellow, and that's pretty reliable. Just that bark again, I was pulling off. It might do this at a certain age, but it just doesn't have the smooth texture of Felicifolia. And that amber gum was coming out as well. But yeah, just that platy fibrous bark I was pulling off. That's the Australasian Virtual Herbarium records, and that's probably the core area there. I think there's just some talk that some of this might be naturalisation in these parts, but you know, this is sort of the core area, and this might be sort of from, you know, planting and spreading it further afield. But you know, even if that was the core area, you can see it's confined to New South Wales. Records here probably just from plantings, naturalisations. And this record here would probably have incorrect coordinates. You know, you'd have to think either it's a naturalisation or some sort of incorrect coordinate. So that's pretty much it for Acacia parramattensis. You can get familiar with it. You can find it growing with Decurrens in pretty much all these areas or a lot of the range here. But take some time and you should be able to discern it quite easily. Just a table again. Just remember, I'll throw this in every time, and there's the parramattensis entry. Jugary glands, yes, and interjugary sometimes. And when they are there, there's only one. There's only one gland. So we're saying sometimes, but only one, and just compare that to what we saw in Felicifolia. Alrighty, I'll put up the next one when I can.